Want to do a real check real quick. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, great. What we're going to do, I want to thank you all for being a part of this gathering, I would like to call, getting the dross off the gold, rediscovering who you really are. What we're going to do is I'm going to start off with a PowerPoint presentation. I call it 12 preparatory slides. And after that, the four initial expressionists, as I like to call people, they will introduce themselves and say a little bit about themselves. Then I will ask the clinician, Brother Minister Sar Winkler, to give his point of view as it pertains to the topic of discussion. But before that, I will give give a definition of the two, the anxiety disorder and trauma stress related disorder. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Let's see if I could permit all people join. Okay. Permit all. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yes. Greetings and the best of salutations to Common Humanity Mission Incorporated presents Getting the Dross Off the Gold, Rediscovering Who You Really Are. The dross is associated or related to particles of impurity when it comes to our feelings / emotions, thoughts, attitude, communication / language, and activity. As we see, the leg represents that which one is able to stand on. The best teacher is a child. That when a child crawls, it wants to stand on its own 2 feet, its own merit, meaning its own conviction. That which we want to reclaim is social solidarity. The reason why I said that, because when you have respect for yourself, and when we have respect for one another, anything that comes at you will proceed coming at you with caution. Yes. I want to talk a little bit about the DNA of common humanity. We see at the bottom the social cultural science. Science for me is nothing is created of itself, nor for itself. It is to benefit all. Culture is defined by the totality of a people's thought and practice. Yet culture is necessary, but it's not sufficient, only because you have to take a very serious look at culture when it becomes destructive. You have to take a very serious look at anything when it becomes destructive. Social. I've come to learn that social stress leads to mental pain, and mental pain leads to physical harm. The technology that we have before us, we must be able to utilize it and take advantage of it. Agriculture or agriculturalists, we see the word culture in association with agriculture. If the rain falls from the sky, and it does, it produces a crop. That means to be productive. There must be a higher power somewhere. So the brain cells is constructed to think properly, and we're here to be productive. As an industry of being productive as an industry. Then we are promoters. We promote that industry. We cultivate it and we communicate it. And we have the opportunity to express appreciation for life in all life. What to expect? Welcome in all languages, if I may use that, many languages. For me, language is an aspect of one's behavior. You will be inspired, you will be informed, you will be enlightened, you will be encouraged, and you will be empowered. Common humanity mission. Our mission is to promote the value of self-worth. Our motto is to communicate with precision a clearer image to the world. That is through 5 channels of communication: understanding, tolerance, temperament/temperament, confidence, and respect. Our mandate is to cultivate the potential knowledge that is inside of us all. The 4-point platform, which we will be speaking from, is academic freedom. Academic, that which you are venting of, that which you are expressing, because everybody have need for self-expression. The clothes that we wear in the car that we drive, Brother Paul Thompson makes that clear. Second will be intellectual independence/interdependence. We know as we are a child, we'll come out to be dependent, then independent, then interdependent. Stars, the moon, and the sun, they are interdependent in one another. That is to be in harmony. Financial stability and spiritual understanding. We want to preserve the best of relationships with ourselves and with others. This is common humanity, social health model. The task, the effort, the time, the energy, and the nature. Perceived susceptibility, advantages and disadvantages. Advantages, perceived severity, which means sometimes we take on this imaginary hurt that is not there. Then the health motivation, perceived benefits, all that we see is a benefit may not be a benefit. Open-mindedness, closed-mindedness, narrow-mindedness, and perceived barriers. On the other side is the result, restoring social credibility, resulting in readdressing social diversity, because we are a diverse group of people. That's getting the dross off the gold. That is the beauty of America, you know. Welcome the diverse group of people who wants to rediscover and change their lives. Third, resulting in revising social coherency. Then on the other side, resulting in replenishing the continuity, I would say about confidence and cooperating one another, because Dr. Du Bois, Kwame Ture talks about this continuity, this flow has been interrupted. But this is associated with flows and blockages and limitations and accomplishments. And finally, resulting in reclaiming social solidarity. Anything that exists can be measured. These will be our key to success. There will be a need meeting period. We hope to meet the need when it comes to one's incentives as we become, reacquainted with ourselves. There is a issue resolving period, which is designed to address initiatives of one determination. Problem solving period, it is designed to readdress influences that which influences us, environmental or otherwise. And 4, the question and answer period was designed to reingest indicators. What are the indicators when it comes to anxiety disorder and post-trauma stress? Problem-solving skills. Build self-determination, such as goal setting, decision-making, memories of dialogue, discussion, and exchange. And in the discussion, it brings forth a decision that is to be made. And the exchange must be based on reciprocity, which means must be mutual. And that deals with mutual respect. We want to help the people to demonstrate a sense of maturity, a sense of responsibility, and a sense of wisdom. Remember, a pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. Optimist sees an opportunity in every difficulty. What we would do in a variety of problem-solving processes, we will identify what the problem is, then we will, set goals. We will evaluate. Plato or Socrates says, an examined life is not a life worth living at all. We have to examine ourselves and go through self-introspection. Then we explore. We look for alternatives. We select, and there we implement. Pay it forward. Self-evaluating self is expiring. Friends helping friends is informing or informative. Families housing families is enriching. And enlightening. Organizations helping organizations is encouraging. And nations helping nations is empowering. Take a moment and reflect and meditate as we begin the discussion. welcome, plant seeds of hope, love, and may it come back in abundance. Now, this is the time where it's that we're going to, everyone who's on before initial expressionists, Dennis, Asar Winkler, William Murray, Paul Thompson, and Marcus Sankofa Nix. Would you please introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about yourselves? William Murray, since you're the elder, you can go first.
Hello, family. I'm Professor William Murray. I'm the president of the Millionaire Mastermind Institute. We take you from idea to implementation and beyond. We build millionaire mindsets, lifestyles, and businesses. I am a mindologist. I'm a 45-year entrepreneur, educator, speaker, and author. What I teach, and we here at the Institute teach, we teach the thought and the action process to success, whether it's spiritual, personal, financial, or entrepreneurial. We take you from idea to implementation and beyond. We make sure that you're successful and a winner at whatever it is that you have as a desire or endeavor or wish in life.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Brother Paul Thompson, express a little bit about yourself.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm Brother Paul Thompson, and I am a student of spiritual law. And so my life's work has been about raising the vibration of consciousness and helping those of us who have decided to know thyself or get more understanding of that which is rooted in everything, the spiritual order, more resource to help us on our goals and our ability to tap into our resources to accomplish what we've come here to do in life purpose.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to change a little bit. Sister Michelle Sanjay, could you say a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself?
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm Michelle Sujai. I am a civil engineer by degree, an artist at heart. I graduated from DC's Duke Ellington School for the Arts, and I now work and do more holistic work. I've been renovating houses and all the people who live in them. So it's been interesting because I had 3 pretty bad car accidents, and on my healing journey, I learned how to help heal other people. I was the first person to be given disability for being incapacitated by anxiety. And the only reason I got that disability was because after my car accidents, I did not get over the PTSD, post-traumatic stress, because there was a lot going on that I wasn't even fully aware of. And it took a while with therapy and other things for me to learn the root of my issues. And when I learned how to work through my issues, I found I was good at helping other people. So in Washington, D.C., I started 7 self-help groups for women under the National Black Women's Health Project, which is now the Women's Health Initiative. And I'm a Reiki master, so I actually use Reiki massage as a way to relax people and soothe them, to help them talk through the root of their problem in a timely fashion. And then I use the Reiki energy to help them move out of their women in pain, Reiki and conversion to address their anxiety and help move that through them. So that's what I yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And Sister Michelle Collins, would you want to introduce yourself and express yourself? Say a little bit about yourself. Michael Collins. I don't know if Michael Collins, sorry. Okay, Brother Gary, you want to share a little bit, introduce yourself, share a little bit about yourself? Okay, Gary. Brother Marcus Sankover-Nix, it's on you now, brother.
Hello, this is Michael Collins.
Okay, hey.
I didn't know that you were going to call on me,
Yes, sir, we might as well just keep the flow, go ahead.
but I've been a metaphysician for 30 years, maybe even longer.
Mhm.
I've studied anywhere from astrology, tarot, done meditation, yoga, and now I love transcendental meditation and going into the transcendent state and going into the higher states of consciousness. So my whole goal is to explore consciousness, to find levels of inner peace, and use that as a guide or as a template to guide us through this world. As we go through all the chaos, we always remain peaceful, hopeful, and we see the glory of the Most High.
Thank you, thank you. All right, Brother Marcus Sankover-Nix.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marcus Sankover-Nix. Delighted to be here. I am a longtime member of the T-Nat Holistic Wellness Center. That beautiful edifice that you see Brother Dennis Winkler amongst. I've been a longtime member of that organizational entity and family, and even before that inception. But I am also a public school educator going on 12 years. I'm a historian, a researcher, and a student of African and African American history. And so I use history as a framework and a vehicle to teach, whether it's teaching African American studies or African American related courses, and supporting and being a consultant for other staff members on how to teach and instruct and support Black students from a trauma-informed, culturally relevant approach. And so as a student of history, even though much of my research is in that endeavor, primarily in educational history, because I'm in education, I do acknowledge that that is one cog on the wheel. And so as it's been put forth many times from the T-Nat Holistic Wellness Center, everything is connected. So I like to, when approaching the work that I do, also take into account all the different elements, the different perspectives, to be able to push forward what it is that I can do to serve my community. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yes, y'all look well. Brother Dennis Assad Winkler, tell a little bit about yourself, what you do.
Greetings. Peace, Brother Kevin. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having us. I want to say greetings to the panel. I'm not the best at talking about myself or trying to explain things. However, I like to say that I'm a husband, a father, your brother. I am an entrepreneur, success coach. William Murray, I'm coming for you. You know, I'm a licensed professional counselor, trained in integrated psychology and spirituality. If I had to choose a framework, you know, I don't get stuck in frameworks, but if I had to choose a framework for the way that I approach healing, I would say is an African-centered framework, but I am open for all the boxes till they don't exist anymore.
Thank you. Now, we're going to get started because we want to create an atmosphere that bonds, that builds, that heals, reveals, and ultimately rediscover who we really are. And we have this licensed brother clinician, Dennis Assad Winkler with the Wellness Center. Remember, our platform is from an academic perspective, intellectual, financial, as well as spiritual. Brother Winkler, I'm going to give a definition of the two disorders and give your perspective on those disorders. Anxiety disorder, a group of mental illnesses that cause constant fear and worry, characterized by sudden feeling of worry, fear, and restlessness. And post-traumatic stress disorder, a mental health condition that develops following, like an exemplary act, that's what following is, a traumatic event characterized by intrusive, that which invades the thoughts about the incident, reoccurrent distress and anxiety on a continuing basis, a flashback. You know, sometimes I have flashbacks, think I'm younger than I am. You know, so, you know what I'm saying? And avoidance. You know, some things we do not want to confront, so we avoid it of similar situations. Brother Dennis Assam Winkler, on you. Then everyone else will have their input after.
Well, I just make it brief. I think that was suffice. I like to just try to stretch it to trauma-related disorders. I really don't think that post-traumatic stress disorder captures trauma to its fullest. So I would suggest that we talk about trauma in general, trauma-related disorders, and even the trauma-related disorders as defined in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, is not suffice enough to actually capture the trauma that many of us have, especially when we talk about the African American or Black community, or however we want to identify. It definitely doesn't capture the trauma. Trauma such as racial-based trauma and so on and so forth would not even fall in any of those categories. But we'll talk about trauma. And as you're speaking about flashbacks, at least your flashbacks seem a little, they seem a little bit less intrusive and more good, welcoming to you. They might be a little delusional, however, they definitely are probably, you probably enjoy those experiences rather than what many who experience flashbacks or things that remind them, to trigger them, more intrusive and a lot, it takes them back many times to reliving the event or feel like they're actually in the event at the time they're reminded through the trigger or flashback.
Thank you. All right, it's thank you, brother. The floor is open now.
This is Sujai.
Yes.
My comment as someone who was put on disability for anxiety is part of my issue was I had suppressed memories. And so the memories were trying to come up. The car accidents caused me to have memory loss. And when I was working on regaining my memory after the first car accident, some of my suppressed memories came up. And then I had another car accident that just made the floodgates kind of open. And that's one reason I became agoraphobic and able to move past this. There was a block of suppressed memories I didn't want to remember. So I've actually, attracted a lot of people who've had memory loss and helped them get to the root of their suppression, why they suppressed it and what they suppressed, and it helped me to fully identify what I suppressed. And that is one of the issues with traumas that Black people, people of color suffer in childhood, teenage years, college, wherever else, is that if we're brought up to believe that the world and people in it are good and fair and just, and then we go out into the world and we find out that very little of that is true.
We have lost her there. Yes, she was speaking on these suppressed memories and how the society said that that people are, maybe they are good and find out that they are not as good as what people say that they are. It sounds like almost like a confidence trickster, which means that one tries to gain your confidence and tricks you into becoming your friend at the expense of trying to, deceive you and take advantage of you. So, go ahead.
Well, Kevin, this is Professor Murray. Kevin, when you're dealing with mental stress and anxieties, that's one of the most difficult situations and times really in your life. It's hard. You've really got to learn to control your thoughts, your moods, and your habits. You got to change. And see, a lot of people are afraid of change. And I know a lot of it is and it's all mental, really, because you got to work on your mental mind, even in your recovery. You have to work on your mentalness. And when you're in your comfort zone, and that's always where you're comfortable, even in thinking negatively or thinking positively. It's something that you yourself got to work on. But once you realize that you have an issue or a problem, it's easier to control. That's the hardest thing, is to get people to understand that it's a problem that can be solved, but it's not going to happen overnight, and it takes time. And you can't fear the fact of change. And if you're godly, one thing you have to realize, and that is God and fear cannot occupy the same space. And once you start getting into the change that is necessary, like every little change eventually grows into a big change. It's like every penny you find eventually will be $1. So you got to grow and build that change and that mental process, which is difficult. It really is. When you got to make a mental change, that's going from a mindset of fear and negativity, that's a hard process, brother. And that takes time and a lot of change and realization.
So if I can, I want to deal with this memory piece for a moment, because I think that that's very critical to, I believe, this healing process that we speak about in terms of overcoming these barriers and obstacles to be able to be the best versions of ourselves. One of the things that I realized, as an educator working with youth, and one of the things that sparked and inspired a lot of the work that I did in the aspect of history is whenever we would get to talk about the history of Black people or Africans or African Americans or whatever you want to refer to it as, a lot of times my students were turned off. They were turned away because their point of reference was negative. Their point of reference is what some scholars would say was from a deficit standpoint. So he didn't hear about the illustrious classical civilization sprinkled all around Africa. He didn't hear about the inventions and all of the uprisings and the agency and the resistance and all of those high things. Their memory and their point of reference automatically went to something that was traumatic: whips, chains, brutality, violence, hostility. And so memory is very, 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 very big. And then even on a personal level, I believe Minister Alsara mentioned perhaps a couple of weeks back, this idea of avoidance. And so a lot of times we may compartmentalize or block certain things out within our own minds on a personal level, on an individual level. Something may have happened to us in our childhood, or something may happen in our relationships, or we might have incurred an injury or something may have went down. And so what I notice tends to sometimes be a pretty often occurrence is this notion of avoidance, to be able to not have to deal or not have to confront or not have to address. And so there's a book called Attachment. That's one of the books that we've read before in our circles, our discussions and our discourses. And, you know, even those who may avoid, a lot of times the root of that is anxiety. And that's one of the disorders that I think Brother Kevin was speaking about. So that memory piece, the suppression of memory can be huge. But I would suggest that one of the things that could aid us on the road to healing is to embrace our past, to embrace all of our history. Now, even in contemporary times, you have a lot of social media and news and people that are talking about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and talking about all of these historic events that happened and how healing is happening and people or reconciliation is happening, are people acknowledging the past. And that sounds good, but a lot of times we operate with unresolved conflict. We operate and we try to function as best we can with that trauma that hasn't been resolved and that trauma that hasn't been dealt with. So I would suggest as we go back and reflect on the past, memory is very important because memory can trigger things and can make it difficult to confront. But once we can build that courage and build that fortitude to address and confront that which has happened, how we view the past, how we construct and think about the past will help how we view the present and can impact us in the future. So I think that memory piece is huge. And I just wanted to just emphasize and expound on that because I think that that's a very important aspect of the discussion.
Yes, sir. I see you, brother. Saad. Go for it. Thank you, brother. And you too, Mr. Mary. Thank
I think, brother.
You know, Kev.
Oh, let Dennis go
Okay.
first. Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll acquiesce to my elder.
He is acquiesced to you.
You know, Kevin, the brother Brother Nix was speaking, and the things that he said, you know, it's hard to not live in your past. You know, because one thing you gotta realize, the past, you don't live there no more. The only place you can live is the present, and work on doing better and improving the future. I mean, it is truly mental, and he's correct about the mindset and the mental part, and it is a struggle. We've got to realize, and when we're helping those who are going through that, to give them the facts and the reality of today, and let them know you can't live there because that's yesterday. You can't relive yesterday. You can't let your past hold your future hostage. And that's what a lot of the information situations come from. They let their past hold their future hostage. And that's one of the worst things that we could ever do. And that's where the thing of change comes in, and you can't fear change. Like I say, you know, a lot of times I tell my students or my clients, and in fact now push and push and push. And it is true that God and fear cannot occupy the same space.
Thank you. Brother Saad, you want to share something?
Yes. I think I can remember, or I'll just flow. I think what Brother Sankofa said is really, really, really important.
Yes.
As it relates to memory and history. I'm very critical of the way that we tell our story. Not just the masses or what we call popular culture. I'm even speaking to those of us who tell it from an African-centered framework. I think that many times we tell our stories from a deficit mindset. In fact, I think I might have spoke about it the last time we were on here, but Dr. Malefikidi Asante talks about a lot of us are conscious of oppression, and that means that we tend to focus on how we were oppressed, not so much how we were victors. And that is what I find is popular, even in some of the circles that we call conscious, but even more so, it's spilt over into mainstream society where it's popular to be less than victorious. And we've had many victories. In fact, there's a victory that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 of us are on this particular call right now. I think one brother that I really appreciate outside of Dr. Malefi Kiyosanti is also Dr. Naim Akbar. Dr. Naim Akbar speaks about this thing where we have to get ourselves together. He says that it's a miracle that we, if the brother, let's say this, he said, we got to go and we got to get ourselves together. He said, some people might be smoking crack. He said, but we got to go get ourselves together. He says, put your crack pipe in your back pocket and we'll talk about that later, but we got to go and get ourselves together. And he said, because it's a miracle that we're still here. But speaking to more of how that narrative is very important, because research supports that an African-centered framework has been efficacious to mental health. So when I say mental health, let's understand mental health is a good thing, right? When we think about mental health, we might even think of that from a negative perspective. Mental health, physical health is, but moreover, we have to be careful that we don't continue. Well, let me say this: the deficit model that talks about how we were enslaved, how we were beat up, how we were raped. Not to ignore those things, but if that's it, what it does is it perpetuates trauma. It reinflicts trauma. It keeps us in a traumatic state, not being able to actually materialize anything. So again, trauma, I would say, is very similar to anxiety. In fact, at one time they used to be in the same section of what they call the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, but they separated them out because of a few things. But we know that there's an event, and sometimes I say this event is passed down generationally through our mouth to ear communication. So we have to be careful in the narrative we speak about our history.
Yes, sir. Brother Paul Thompson, you have something to share?
That's it.
Yes. Okay, now, Brother Michael, what about you, brother?
Yes, in listening to everybody speak, I hear many different things, but the one thing that I don't hear is raising our level of consciousness.
Yeah.
And in raising our level of consciousness, we go beyond the sleeping, dreaming, awake, and we start to transcend. When we start to transcend, we then start to look at things from a point of view of our beingness. So we become a witness to life. And so the situations in life that seem to affect us and leave the scars, we leave those behind. As we transcend and come into cosmic consciousness, and more we move into God consciousness, next thing we move into unity consciousness, and finally we move into Brahman consciousness. When we elevate our levels of consciousness, we have the ability to get rid of all the post-stress that we've had. We've had the ability to live in the truth of ourselves. I mean, we can look at the history and we can keep repeating the history, but when we're articulating that history, all we're doing is articulating the lies of the past. And as long as you keep articulating the lies of the past, you will never get to the truth. That's why I say, as we transcend that, as we start to transcend that and go into our higher levels, into our higher nature, we come to that truth. And when we come to that truth, we find a greater peace inside ourselves. And when we find that greater peace, that's the bridge to help us transform into the people that we want to be, the people that we were born to be, to bring out our God-given talents and to raise our consciousness. So the events of the past, to me, are just stepping stones to get us to a point where we can raise and elevate our consciousness. But everything is raising, and for me, is raising and elevating the consciousness so that we become aware of ourselves and the truth of ourselves. And when we do that, and when we meditate, we eliminate stress, because stress comes from not having rest, not getting proper sleep, not interpreting your dreams properly. That's at the root of all stress. And when we give up the stress, what we come into is that state of beingness where we start to witness everything in life. And when we witness everything in life, there's no need to hold on to the past, because that only keeps us muddled up in the darkness.
Thank you, brother. Sister's back. Sister, did you want to finish what you were sharing? Sister Sunji? Or do you want to follow up on what the gentleman just said?
I definitely agree with what you're saying. But what I found is that, especially with spiritual people, and I'm one, and I believe in a whole lot of things, but what I've noticed about Black people is we have it's not karma, but we have special lessons on a spiritual level that we must learn. And in order to learn them, we go through trauma that allows us to see and deal with things that we wouldn't volunteer for. I believe everybody on this panel has been through some stuff they would not have volunteered for in order to become as educated as you are, because you were looking and researching yourself, your family, your friends. And so I know that my post-traumatic stress and anxiety order was a lesson, a blessing, and a curse all at the same time. That it took me off the path I was on, required me to learn and investigate things I didn't want to learn, and now I'm better able to help other people because of what I've learned. But everything you said, meditate, pray, do whatever else. But the biggest thing is finding out the root of the problem. And some of it is family history, some of it is personal history, and some of it is just cultural history. The stress that people are under right now with Black Lives Matter, when you cut on the news and every other day somebody's being killed senselessly, but even the mass murders, it's making a lot of people afraid. And it's not unrealistic fear, but we still must go on with knowing that these fearful things are out there. So.
Thank you. Paul, you look like you're ready to say something, Paul.
Well, what I would, I guess, say at this point is, as a student of law, following, studying, embracing, experiencing laws that are spiritual and demonstrable but unseen with the physical eye, that I believe that a lot of our challenges that we're here to experience, learn from, overcome, that we create unattended consequences constantly. And when we create these unattended consequences, it takes a person of a certain maturity to deal with those unattended consequences, being that we live in a world that is spewing out certain elements of challenge. And so if there was a environment where people were able to grow and develop naturally, an educational system that would teach people according to the laws, then we would have obviously a much more effective society in terms of human behavior and human interaction. It appears that the way most of us have been conditioned from birth creates a certain element or a challenge to know thyself. And as a result of that, it appears that we create constantly on a day-to-day basis unattended consequences that the universe will send a lesson to us to understand at a more mature level. But if we're not ready to open up to receive the lesson, then those consequences continue to grow until they create anxiety, stress, all the other elements of what we call mental illnesses and sicknesses. Is because we're not tapping into the resourcefulness of who we truly are. And as two of the brothers, I think on the platform mentioned, raising our higher selves, raising ourselves up to a higher vibration, because again, where is it taught? How do people know to raise their vibration? How do people know to raise their consciousness until they're taught to go inwardly with meditation and other forms of heightened energy so that people can begin to understand these things. So some of us come here with higher vibrations because of our energy in our names. And some people come here with mentorship. And so all of this has to do with the balancing of the planet and how we come to have elders before us that begin to present to us. And many may be blocked because of their upbringing or their environment, that they don't want to hear from the elders. But when you study society as a whole, everywhere on planet Earth, you have a hierarchy where the people listen to their elders almost in a value, but the African American here in the United States.
Kevin, you know, one thing I've realized as I travel the country, I just did a 2-week stint down in Myrtle Beach, and I'm on my way to New York Monday for a week or so to do presentations and to teach at this educational institute. The biggest problem that we have that's causing us problems is the fact that we don't know. Like you were talking about repeating the same mistake over and over. It's because we don't know. So you repeat it. We've got to teach, we as a people. Now look at what's going on right now in Oklahoma, in Tulsa. I was listening to a gentleman on the radio talk about he grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's in college, a junior or so in college, and had never heard about the massacre in Tulsa, where he grew up. So they aren't teaching it. Now, with the system as it is today, and we're putting the knowledge out there, and the youth are seeing it, and the elderly are picking it up, things are changing. We're looking and learning about power. Look what November did. It woke up a lot of people of color, Black people, to learn about power. See, you've got to, I'm looking now at this this part of history that I have here that talk about what happened to us as a people from the late 1800s to the present day. And it's at least 25 locations on the east and west and east and southern coast where Black people had successful townships but were burned out or destroyed through the system of racism, hatred, and ignorance. You look at the story of Tulsa, look at the one of Rosewood, Look at the one in St. Paul Parish. And when you look at those, to realize they were above the towns around them. And those were Black townships. A lot of people don't realize how Tulsa became known as Black Wall Street. Don't look at the fact of it being named Black. Look at the reason it was called Black Wall Street. Look at New York in 1863 when they burnt down part of New York because the Black community was so prosperous. Look at Charleston in 2015 where they had problems, that they couldn't stand the fact that Blacks were up and coming. Look at the election of November, what they're doing now to stop us from voting and seeing power. See, when we stop having the love of power and start using the power of love and get out there and do what we need to do among each other, a lot of these issues we have won't exist.
Yes.
Because we don't know. And we aren't educating each other about the knowledge that we have and that's happening, we're going to have these struggles. Because you got people out there, it's just they don't know. Period.
Yeah. I want to share something too, in regards to what most people said. The brother Michael was talking about this transcendental. I realized that there's 4 phases in life. You transform, you transition, you transcend, you transmit, or 5 phases, and you transfer. Kwame Ture said the duty of the conscious is to make the unconscious aware of their unconscious behavior, which means we're talking about how we were talking about anxiety and group feelings or thoughts. But it's how we organize our thoughts. Professor Hardy talks about whereas there at one time we were not able to articulate our experience for us, someone else had to articulate that for us, so therefore we suffer in silence. And silence is a precursor to a rage. That's psychology. That's psychology 101. So I think that we need to get to a point now where we understand this here is that it's called automatic thoughts, unfair comparisons. Huh? What does unfair comparison say? It says that you interpret events in terms of standards that are unrealistic. For example, you focus primarily on others who do better than you and find yourself inferior because that which we have been in charge with is being inferior. So remember, we talk about trying to reference a particular point in time in one's life, and that is really unfair if we begin 1619 and we don't go beyond that, or what we deal with Tulsa and we don't go beyond that, if we don't deal with what's going on right now and with that which is before us, because we want to make the transition from victim to victorious. Unfair comparisons, huh? Because we are a diverse group. We talking about getting the dross off the gold. That means we are a diverse group. We're here in a melting pot of America. You know what I'm saying? It's called the melting pot. And it's the most beautiful thing that you ever want to be a part of. Be around.
Kevin.
Huh?
Kevin, you went mute.
Yes. So
okay.
So yeah, so we want to get to unfair comparisons. You find yourself inferior in the comparison because social comparison we're dealing with says she's more successful than I, or others did better than I, or did on the test. This is what Dr. King said this. He said the 3 dimensions of a complete life. He says this one guy was going to school, he did math faster than him. He had to realize he had to accept his own tools. And that's the principle of self-acceptance. So we have to first accept ourselves before anybody accepts us. And one more thing I want to share, and I'm opening up again, that that we want to be clear on, is called emotional reasoning. Look at that. You let your feelings guide your interpretation of reality. I feel depressed, therefore my marriage is not working out. Man, we got to break these barriers, getting the dross off the goal. Yes, go ahead now.
Peace. I want to talk about, I want to kind of go back and speak about the importance of history. And in every psychiatric or psychological evaluation, a clinician and even other practitioners get some type of history. I want to talk about the importance of history from a different perspective than I think Brother Michael. I don't think history has to keep you bound. I think history can keep you bound, as I articulated earlier. And I also think that we did speak about consciousness, because I spoke about consciousness of oppression, which I believe is that which keeps you bound. And I spoke about consciousness of victory. So the consciousness was mentioned. Then I also want to talk about how it's important when one is dealing with such things as trauma to really deal with the history. Because what is haunting a person, if I can use that word, is the history. My sister, Michelle, I believe, stated something earlier about suppressed memories, which is history. And if those thoughts are not dealt with or processed, which we use in the clinical sense, is if it's not processed, I don't care how much spiritual meditation you do, because I'm into meditation. I'm into meditation. I do all types of meditation with my clients. But some of them can't even get to meditating because they have not processed those thoughts. They can't keep their mind still because they haven't processed those thoughts. Those thoughts are, the memory is held in the body. So anytime, they don't even know why many times they're responding to things. And many times, as my sister suggested or stated, once you start opening it up, you realize the rabbit hole is a little deeper than what we realize. So we have to go and deal with that history, even if we don't have to get stuck there. Brother Kevin and Wally Moo, Kevin says that history, or what do you say, Brother Kevin? You said so beautifully.
Past is just a reference point. It's not a place of residence.
Yes. However, I will maintain that by processing your history and dealing with that history and going through it, it will allow us to be less reactive and more responsive. Less reactive and more responsive. So even if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what we talk about psychological needs, the first level being food, water, warmth, rest, shelter, all these type of things, right? So when somebody's been traumatized, or somebody's dealing with anxiety or not dealing with anxiety, let me say that, suffering from anxiety, dealing with them, let's say that. When anxiety is dealing with a person or trauma is dealing with a person, they feel like they are under attack. So maybe can't even, get in, so they have to deal with that because they're dealing with the basic level, even though they could have all in the world. But at that moment, they're dealing with a base level. How do we get to the high level? We have to deal with that history. We have to process that and allow and not allow it to continue to plague us. Because what we have done is suppress it. Or first of all, we suppressed it and then it's repressed.
Can't do it. Yeah.
Meaning that you don't even know it's there. Suppressing is a voluntary act.
And you end up attracting things that will remind you.
You will attract
because
things.
you have to remember.
You will attract things. And you will step on your own foot. So what happens is we have to deal with the history. We have to deal with the psychological basic level. We have to deal with those memories that's inside of our bodies, even if we don't know the story. And when we tell the story, when we know the story, then we can start to see, because the story is there, we just don't know what it is. And you're right, brother, it's a lie for the most part. It's a lie. It's a lie, but it's some reality in there, some realness in there as well. Because the story that you're telling yourself is that everything is a threat that reminds you, and you don't even know why. Your body tells you it's a threat. So once we start to look at it and examine it and process it, we get to see that everything that reminds you, everything that smells like it, everything that doesn't look like it, everything that looks, smells, tastes, touch, or whatever is not that thing that hurts you. And then we can begin to go up that hierarchy of needs to safety needs. We can't even get to safety because we haven't pleased our first and most basic needs with psychological needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. Then we can get to love. And we can talk about the problem in our community as far as coming together, because that's the whole nother level. You can't trust nobody when you've been traumatized, especially if it's been at the hands of others. In fact, if it was, you just can't do it. It's too much risk there. I can't be vulnerable to meditate. I can't be vulnerable to close my eyes. But again, then we get to esteem, needs, prestige, and feeling of accomplishment. Then we can get to self-actualization, which is a higher level of consciousness.
Can I mention one other thing?
Yes, ma'am.
That when we have incomplete memories and incomplete understanding of what's going on with us, and a lot of it's based on our history of oppression for years and years and years, we don't know the history of our parents' oppression. They don't tell us the details. They may not even understand fully what they've been through, but they've been through stuff and they pass that on to us. Their parents have been through stuff. And when we don't deal with that, we consider oppression normal. We consider repression normal. We consider not acknowledging the truth of abuse because it's a daily thing. And
Absolutely.
so we also consider that normal. Our normal is to accept abuse, accept trauma, to accept things, and only go to church to, pray it away. So those are some of the things too that I know are key to our healing, is for us to be able to know the truth about where our stresses are coming from, which is difficult because we don't necessarily know. I just recently found out that things I was considering normal in my household, other people said not only was it not normal, but my household was, hazardous to my health. That people in the house literally were trying to take me out. And I got out of the house before that happened, fortunately. But we're told you love your parents love you. But sometimes there's something else going on. And those kind of traumas, not understanding that, having to then later in life accept that the people that who are responsible for your life, well-being, food, clothing, and shelter are not really equipped to take care of those things for you from a small child, for whatever reasons, whatever their trauma is. But those are a lot of things that too many of us are dealing with, coming from households that were not capable of making them feel safe as a child. So how do you feel safe as an adult?
Absolutely.
Right,
Sister
but the
Michelle,
thing,
I was just gonna say, Sister Michelle, I'm not sure what you're talking about, because I mean, I'm gonna go with the Big Mama. Big Mama gonna work it out. Bishop, pastor, such and such, pork chop, they gonna work it out. I'm gonna go and confide in them. They gonna be the ones to handle it. But no, you're absolutely correct. In terms of going to competent individuals to be able to support us where we're at. And one of the things that I also have been reflecting on as we've been having this conversation is this notion of truth. And getting back to the narrative, one of the things, from my standpoint, that I believe a lot of times doesn't help us to reach this self-actualization process or getting the dross off the goal is we think we the only ones with a narrative. We think we the only ones with a story. And what does this look like? This looks like this or that, right, wrong, me versus you the enemy, everybody's the enemy. And one of the things that I believe is important is just, and I think it's an act of humility. A lot of times we can get in our own heads and get in our own minds, and the victim mentality can continue to move back in. And so I would suggest that we may have our frame point or our point of reference or our stories or our way of seeing things, but that's not the only way. And so for others who have different perspectives, different ideologies, belief systems, different viewpoints, we don't have to always agree, but others have perspectives and viewpoints as well. And narrow mindsets can a lot of times keep us from reaching the goal. And so, as we talked about earlier, being able to reflect on the victimization and what has been done, being passive, and brother Kevin had said this earlier on about somebody for such a long time, our story's been told for us. But it's so powerful when you can be able to change. You have a narrative, but also know that others can have narratives too, or can have stories too, and that's okay. And I think sometimes that trips us up as well too, and that can box our thinking in. So we have stories, we have narratives, but our truth is not the end all be all truth. Our truth is not the universal truth. Our truth is simply that, our truth. And once we can at least open our minds up to know that other people have truths and other people have stories and other peoples can bring point of views and perspectives to the table, then that can also help us in the long run as well, I believe.
Gentlemen, something that came to mind is, and I'm going to tell y'all the story, but I want to first say this. We have an issue because we are learning a history that's taught to us, that's not for us, and power building for us. The most important, one of the most powerful, period, question that we stop asking and searching for the answer for is the question of why. Now, I'm going to tell you the story that was told to me. This little girl was watching her mother in the kitchen fixing dinner. So she bought a ham and she saw her mother cutting the ends off of the ham. She says, "Mom, why do you do that?" She said, "Well, I saw my mother do it." So she said, "Well, go ask your grandmother." So she went to the little girl and said, "Hey, Grandma," says, "why did you teach Mom to cut the ends off of the ham?" She says, "Baby, because I saw my mother do it." So she says, "You got to go ask your great grandmother." So she went to her great grandmother, which means that's 4 generations, and says, "Great grandma, why did you teach Grandma and your grandchildren to cut the ends off the ham?" She says, "Baby, it wasn't me teaching them. That's just big as the pot we had back then." No one took the time to ask the powerful question of why. We're taking and learning a history that is against us. We were not slaves when we came here. We were enslaved. Our history did not start in 1619. It ended in 1619. Until we start looking and researching and finding the why.
Do you know
what is
why?
going on, we're going to struggle.
Do you know why? I mean, I think we know why. Why did they enslave us? Because
But that's not the whole big story. The story is so huge that one why is not going to answer it all.
But I'm saying, but every time they open a door for us, every time we find out who we are, we take over. They didn't integrate things because as soon as we get in the door, we take over. It was always though that Black girls were not going to be in gymnastics. As soon as they let 2 of those little suckers get in there, what happened?
You see what they just did, that young lady that did that somersault they said was impossible to do?
Exactly.
She did it. And what did they do? They outlawed the move. The head of gymnastics told them that They outlawed. They said you can't do that.
Exactly.
I
And
think
it's
So
they
look what
repress.
they did to Kareem
let me chat.
Abdul-Jabbar.
I
They
have to come
stopped.
in on this one though. I have to come in on this one here because we want to stay on course here. Because there is a saying that people glorify get glory in athletics, but don't get glory in academic.
Right,
anyone
there
can,
you go.
we can flip. We say why.
Maybe.
I know where I come from, and I don't have to say from Africa. I come from my mother's womb. Let's be clear, I come from my mother. You know what I'm saying? So I think because for me, all things are proximity. The why is that the new life is the existence of the previous life. That's why. So we have to go through this process. As you say, what is the issue? For me, the issue is character resolve. When you look at the word slave itself, we know linguistically that comes from the word Slavic, which is a Russian term, Slavic.
Right.
But that which we're talking about, the words, no one can really enslave no one's character, no one's integrity, and no one's nobility. Don't make no difference what they say or what they do. So you can see that now. Let's look at the evidence of that now, because look at the dignity and the nobility that we still have amongst ourselves. Huh? That's really taking this thing down to another level when it comes to elevating one's level of consciousness, because vision stems from the source of one's thinking. So
Okay, let me just also add this to the mix. I'm a civil engineer. I was the first female hired to work construction by the Federal Highway Administration, federal government. I was a construction project manager. I was the first Northeast Division engineer for Chevron, a female Northeast Division engineer for Chevron, and I happen to be a Black woman. But on these jobs, they always let me know that they never wanted me there. And on more than one occasion, they literally tried to murder me. And that was not, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean the people aren't out to get you. And so that is one of the things when we start talking about reality, when the reality is that they hire you because they know you're the best and the brightest. And they say, Michelle is the smartest person here. Too bad nobody wants her around.
Because one more thing, I got you there. I got you. Because I think we also got to deal with the language straight, right? We live in a word oppressive environment. I understand the psychological impact. We say we're the Black. There is nothing Black, to me. That's just a concept. There's nothing factual to that. So we also have to get the language right. We have to move beyond biology too, as well. We're saying male and female, the first this and the first that. I understand that. I can appreciate that. But if we want to realize that we must create an environment, as we say, getting the dross off the gold, rediscovering who we really are, we got to realize that we're not a threat to each other. You know what I'm saying? That we continue to bond, we continue to build, we continue to heal, and when we continue to reveal, and then we can rediscover who we really are, because trial and error leads to personal discovery. Trial and error leads to personal discovery. And in the words of Marcus Garvey, he says, an error uncorrected becomes a fact.
Kevin, Pastor Kevin, the education right now that we are getting from each other, not talk about this panel, I'm talking about Black people as a whole. As a whole, we are getting an education, and we're the conscious, we're the heartbeat, we're the rhythm of the world. Black folks are the rhythm of the world. There hasn't been not one field that we haven't gotten into that we at one time have not dominated. But because of us not owning the radio stations, the TV stations, and the educational system, is what's got us. We're being taught by someone who is not as spiritual and as brilliant as we are, but we're believing, because see, the system is not broken. People talking about the system broke, the system broke. The system works perfectly for those that built the system to be against us.
Exactly.
I want to say one more thing too. Now let's look at it. You say that we don't. You use the word dominate. I'm not trying to dominate anything or anyone. All I'm trying to do is control myself, because opportunities are the direct correlation of opportunity, a direct correlation of ownership. That means I must own up, or as Mass how Posse would say, ante up. I also realized too that when we say labor, I labor in the field of life transitional endeavors. What field do you labor in? Huh? We know what they labor in and what field what field you labor in. So we got to put the onuses on ourselves as an individual, huh? Because once, as we talked about, once the individual is healed, then he can go and heal others. But yet there is a book out called The Wounded Healers. You know what I'm saying? But I must admit, in order to get healed, I must first admit that I'm ill. So that's all I'm saying. We got to put the onuses on ourselves.
I have a problem with the onus being on us, because what I've noticed is whenever we have made strides like Black Wall Street, like the other things that we have built and proven that we can do well if we are not oppressed. But when we do this, white people as a rule come for us. And I can say that across the board in the places that I've worked, and noticing how Black people came to California to get away from oppression. And when they took the land from the Japanese during World War II, illegal for Black people to own land in Los Angeles County. And they took everything that we worked. That is all over the country. The so-called oil shortage, which was not real, of the 60s and 70s, was fabricated because the majority of independent service stations in the US were owned by Black people. And they were service stations, not gas stations, because Black mechanics worked and gave such good service that even white people came to Black mechanics to get their car fixed at the Black service station because they knew they could trust that person. So they had to shut down every Black service station. If you notice, if you're old enough to notice, Black people don't own service stations anymore. If you're old enough to remember, we used to own all of the service stations in our communities and in other communities also. And we gave service, not just gas. Whenever we find a place to succeed and do well, and I'm talking about in business, in engineering, in technology, we've invented so many things, and our inventions have been taken from us. Sears and Roebuck was first owned by Roebuck. Sears came in, and then Sears had everything. When Sears took over, the company failed because he didn't have what Roebuck had and the Roebuck family had. But they come for us. And so I know the intelligence of my people, but I also know that whenever we do things, they come for us.
Let me ask you something. So hold up. So hope you said this is a spiritualist talking about materialist. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, that's throwing me off a little bit, because listen, you talking about they're going to come for us. I said no one can enslave your dignity, your integrity, and your character. No one can enslave that. No one at all. So it's okay. So this material world that we live in, this is a spiritual world as well. But we know that for me, anything that is in its natural form and natural state is spiritual. What I'm hearing is that I'm hearing the Du Bois thing, the race versus class, or the hybrid. I'm hearing the vacillation up and down. I'm hearing the struggle. Well, which where are we going to be, and how are we going to go about doing it? Is there a middle ground?
You feel, but that's not what you're hearing. I'm not saying that at all. Mm-hmm. I'm stating facts. Mm-hmm. I can give you facts that what happened. It's not a feeling, it's a fact. You're feeling uncomfortable with the fact that when we succeed, they have come for us. And you have evidence of that too.
I know. Adam B. Will talks about this. So it's cool.
The problem is, I don't understand what the traumas that you have been through that has caused you to be offended by the facts.
You know, now I'm going to. I've been active all for 50 years all over this country.
Go, brother, go.
All over this country, I've been an activist for 50 years. Over 50 years. I've been an activist, and I've been arrested in probably more states than most of y'all been in. But because I was a national activist, you know, one thing I've realized a long time ago, we were bamboozled back in let's say the 40s, 50s, and 60s, because we fought and what we wanted, and we settled for integration. And I say the two worst things that ever happened to us is Christianity and integration. Because we were doing, I know the town I lived in was a racist little town, but everyone that came to service the Black people was Black. Those were businesses. We were bamboozled. We were given, they said, okay, we'll give you integration. We should have said, keep your damn integration. All we want is equality. But they integrated. So that means now we took our little businesses and now we work for Mr. Charlie. And when our kids grow up and need a job, they can't get one because Mr. Charlie said, I said I'd hire you, I ain't said I'd hire your children. We were bamboozled to integrate instead of equality.
Exactly.
Now, one thing I honestly believe, and I always tell them, and I believe this because it saved me. When your mind is a weapon, you are unfit to be a slave. This system, without you knowing it, makes you a slave, and you aren't even worried. Right now, what's her name said? I could have freed many more slaves had they knew they were slaves. Well, that's what's killing us now. We don't realize that we're a slave to a system that was put together to keep us enslaved.
Go ahead, brother. So I'll let you.
Hello?
Oh, brother Kofu, go ahead.
Brother Collins is trying to say something. I think he's been trying to get in.
Yes. Go ahead, brother.
I just wanted to say, I think we've gotten so far from the theme, because the theme was how to get the dross off so that we come back to the goal. And I understand everybody's story. I understand everybody's pain, because those are all, for me, stepping stones, and that's history. And that history is brutal. It does, you see what it does to your psyche. But that history is also part of that dross that keeps us from getting to the goal. So when we start to clear the dross from that statue, or clear the dross from our unconsciousness, that's what leads us to becoming free, liberated, mucha, liberation of the soul, liberation of the consciousness. So that when we start to liberate our consciousness and start to know ourselves, because that's what's getting the dross off. We can hold on, we can talk to all the wrongs that have been done to us, and we could just spend the whole time talking about the root, but to go forward, we have to get this dross off of ourselves to come out to the golden self. As Paul Thompson said, we've got to know ourselves. And if we don't know ourselves, then we're lost in this whole muckety muck of the slavery of everything that we went through. So how do we get the dross off? How do we allow this to go? And for me, my only method, and I'll come back to it again, in Transcendental Meditation, it's the only I've done all types of meditation. And in Transcendental Meditation, you don't want to suppress your thoughts. So thoughts come up all the time. You have a mantra and you transcend the thoughts. You transcend them so that you start to come into your higher self. You start to come into that self that is that inner peace. You start to come into that self that is the higher consciousness, because we're not going to overcome what has been done. What has been done has already been done, and we can't go out and change that. But we can change in this moment your thoughts that keep you away from that peace in life. because the more you hold on to this, to me, this is like more and more holding on to the dross. And when you hold on to the dross, that dross is what's keeping you in slavery. We have universal laws. And when we learn the universal laws and the universal principles, that's what frees us. Because when we put ourselves in harmony with those laws, then we become the all-powerful person. We become that golden figure. We become that what's been hiding underneath all the dross for all these years. And when we open ourselves up to this, we open ourselves up to a new world. We open ourselves up to what we attract to ourselves. Because listening to the story, everybody's stories and their feelings, and they're all justified. They're all very justified because we live in a very racist, hateful society. But that justification should not stop you from becoming the best that you can. And the best that you can become is knowing yourself, knowing the truth about yourself, knowing how your mind works so that your subconscious is a good servant to the conscious. And when that's the servant to the conscious, you become aware of everything that's going on every moment of every day. So we could talk about the past forever and ever, but let's talk about the now. What can we do right in this moment in ourselves that will liberate ourselves from this past so that we have the energy and the thought process to take us into the glorious future that we're meant to have?
Wonderful, wonderful, excellent point. What I would suggest we think about is, what if we wake up tomorrow morning and all white folks disappeared?
Oh, Lord have mercy. That'd be a blessing to the universe.
Now,
I'm sorry, y'all. That's just the way I feel about it. Good question, my brother. Go ahead.
now, we wake up tomorrow morning and all the white folks are gone because they nothing but a distraction. Now,
Right.
Exactly.
when
True.
we understand the relationship that we have to this cosmic universe, this relationship we have to our higher selves, the relationship that we have to the divine creator or creators, he or she, it is telling us our time is now ready to move. And
Yeah.
in my mindset is all the things that we're talking about are symptomatic of carnality. It's just because that we're choosing to play in the carnal world. When we decide to ground ourselves in the spirit world, there's only three basic things that govern the entire universe: energy, matter, and elements. All life form comes through energy vibration. So if we ground ourselves in spirit and energy instead of carnality, the material world, the physical world, all the symptoms, all the dynamics that we're experiencing begin to go away.
You're so right.
We're making this a lot more difficult than what it is. And
Because
so
we're materialistic.
all the things that we're constantly dealing with. You know, I've died 3 times already in this physical body. 3 times I just walked away from death because that was a program to tell me that I'm going to die because this is what you do. It's so much program in us that we believe that's not real. And so the only way you begin to understand it is to acknowledge it, access it, and apply it, and get back the outcome and result that you begin to manifest your spirit, and your spirit is the absolute truth. Everything else is secondary. That's it.
Well, what I would say is to in terms of what to reflect on in the here and now. And I hear your question, Brother Paul, about white folks vanishing, but I don't see them going nowhere no time soon. I'm sorry. I don't see them going nowhere. And I think one of the things that can help us is to re-examine our expectations. Now, white folk been doing stuff. Look, you ain't got to go find the sources. All of us here in this panel know that white folk have done stuff historically up until now. I don't expect white people, or I don't want to say white people and generalize, but the systems that have been in place to oppress and to hold back and disenfranchise Blacks, I don't expect the system to operate any different. And as we talk about the dross off the gold, as we reflect on ourselves, coming into understanding who we are on a higher level can impact how we respond, not how we not how we are so caught off guard, or how we find ourselves in certain things, but how we can respond. And I think once we understand more the power that we have, then we can be able to be in a better position to be able to um, go about not being so surprised, or not being so shocked, or not being so caught off guard, and not trying to avoid even what I've come to realize in meditation. And I know we have practitioners in meditation here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but meditation is to be in the moment, and to be there, to feel, to deal with what is there. And so to avoid and to run, that a lot of times can pull us off confronting and dealing and addressing. And so I would say, Sister Michelle, to really reflect on the narratives that we spew out there. We talked about this deficit victimization type of mentality that we have. And I think a lot of the times we give so much more power to white folk. And I won't just say white folk, it could be to a whole lot of stuff outside of ourselves. I think Toni Morrison spoke about the white gaze, right? We can't do anything because we always worried about, the white person coming to blow the house down and coming to do stuff. And we know that they've done stuff. But how can we self-actualize? And how can we get the dross off the gold if we always have to anticipate? This is the anxiety creeping back in again. If we have to anticipate always, a lot of times, what they're gonna do. Are they gonna allow us to do this? Are they gonna come blow the house down? Are they gonna do more violence? Are they gonna be more brutal? And I think a lot of times, one of the things about trauma is that trauma can take circumstances and it can magnify them. So a lot of times circumstances are not as dangerous and are not as risky as it really actually is. But it's like when you go through one or a couple of experiences, then there's reminders and things that happen that make now everything be a threat, even if it's real or even if it's perceived. Everything now becomes a threat. Everything, and this shows up in real time. Look at how much sleep we lose. Look at all of the different things that we find ourselves doing. But I would just say our expectations. I mean, I'm not surprised with what we see in history. Has a track record that shows a lot of things that happen. So when you see what has happened in history, it can just let us know, okay, well, that's what has been done. But what are the options I have? What are the things within my arsenal? What are the things within my toolbox? But when you're traumatized, but you can't think, like Minister Asar was saying, you can't think, on a higher level. So your agency, your ability to overcome is significantly compromised. And that's why when people are stressed and they're overwhelmed and they're traumatized and they're going through it, they feel helpless. They feel powerless. They feel hopeless. And that's one of the biggest tools that keeps individuals oppressed, because they feel powerless, they feel hopeless, they feel helpless, and they feel like they have no options, when a lot of times that's not the case.
And that's because we're not teaching spiritual law.
Well, one thing I'd like to also.
That was well said.
Oh, he's there. Okay.
I've been trying to go for a minute.
Okay, let Dennis go.
Thank you. I thank everybody. So I want to start off by saying, I don't agree that fear is the opposite of God. I think God, if you want to call it that entity that, or that energy that created fear for a reason. Fear is emotion. It allows us to, it's a messenger. It allows us to realize that there might be a need to take action. Two, history, I wouldn't call history the dross. I would call, let's say, distorted history the dross. And then when you pull the pieces together and see it for more of what it really is, or your limitations to history, then you can see it more accurately, which will get you to what Brother Michael speaks about when he speaks about transcending these things. I also want to talk about transcendental meditation just slightly. Transcendental meditation in and of itself, there's people who have been harmed by transcendental meditation. In fact, there's people who've been, their pockets have been broken by TM. I'm not sure if you're talking about the corporation that created it and basically, what is it called, incorporated and trademarked it and so on and so forth. But there's people who disassociate because of their experiences in that community. So we got to be careful with even transcendental meditation. And sometimes it's transcendental meditation can become nothing more than spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing means that I act like things don't exist. So it's okay. I do agree with Brother Michael when he says that we have to look at things from a wider lens. I agree with Brother Paul when he says we have to look at things from a wider lens. And when I say the wider lens, then we have to realize that, as Brother Kevin articulated, that, you know, when we really looking at things from a spiritual lens or lack of a lens, then all the colors and all these other things that we're getting stuck by is nothing more than our perspectives. Because, and then we use these words of white people and black people and all these things. And I know it exists from a historical material sense, and it somehow can tell a story or what have you. But then we have to realize these things have limitations as well. And sometimes when we say things like white people do this and white people do that, it leads us to believe that we are hopeless, and hopelessness creates trauma. And Dr. Amos Wilson speaks about this whole idea that the boogeyman, the white man, okay, him, the job was to make us feel more in fear than or feel that he or she is more powerful than what he or she truly is. And that is what you feel like when you're being traumatized. You feel like the threat is more real and more threatening than what it truly is. So we talked about that generational trauma from our ancestors and ancestral trauma, which is real. We must respect that. But again, as Brother Michael suggested, I agree with him that that's only a piece of it. But I also want to say that white people aren't the distraction. Our perspectives of white people are the distractions.
Yeah.
So then I also want to go and say that we don't live in a horrible society. We live in a loving society. So what I'm suggesting is it's our perspectives that keep us stuck, because just as much harm and hate and hurt and pain that you see, you also see love. And love, if we really open our eyes up, is more pervasive. I mean, I'm not measuring it, but let's say I don't know what it is. Let's say it's equal. But what I do know is that we are part of the society that we talk about. And if we are part of society, it must be some love in it. That's what I got.
All right, we're going to go around and people have closing remarks, because we're going to bring this thing to a head. When I mean a head, I mean to a dome. And a dome is associated in the manner and way in which one thinks. We're going to start with Sister Michelle. Any closing comments, questions, concerns, remarks?
I really love the discussion and the way things have gone. My closing comment is that in order to move past trauma and anxiety, we must know history, because if you don't know the history, it will repeat itself. But once you know the history, then you can identify the things that tripped you up, that cause you problems, and you can move past them. And then on a spiritual level, you can meditate, pray, do whatever you do, but go to spirit with you and get the answers and the resolve. That's what I did. Doctors and therapists could not help me resolve my issues. I had to go inside, meditate, pray, find my answers, and find solutions. And I found that when I did that, I helped other people slow down, stop running from the trauma, address the trauma, and then let it go. But the first thing is they must know what caused the trauma before you can let it go. To stop yourself from being triggered, you must know what's triggering you. And the history has triggered people. Me knowing the history of white people doesn't make me not deal with them. Most of my greatest allies are white folks. So I know that, but I also know that there are other people who are still out there doing something else. So knowing that, I'm careful, aware, and I choose my allies.
Thank you. Brother Sankofa, you got any closing remarks, questions, concerns, challenges?
I think my mind is overflowing with a lot of different things. I'm trying to think about what exactly to say, but I know this is part one of a continuation of a series. But I think that there's a lot of things to be said. I think once again, being confronting is an act of courage. Confronting is an act of courage. Whether you confront past transgressions or things that you did perhaps in your childhood, or somebody walking out, any kind of abuse, whatever you've been through, or even collectively, a group of people, Black people, or what it is that, or African people, whatever we want to refer to it as, embracing all of that. And when I say embrace, dealing with all of that, because when we can courageously deal with those things, then that can bring us closer to reality. But a lot of times things worsen and things get more difficult, and the problem intensifies the more we run, the more we and I would suggest that that's consistent with the notion of the fight, flight, freeze, faint phenomenon. So confront. I don't care if something happened this morning or whatever it is. A lot of times in our heart of heart, we know what it is. Confront. And that is it. And once we can confront, or in the book, My Grandmother's Hands with Resma Menakem, he speaks about clean pain and dirty pain. And that dirty pain he speaks about is that pain of, avoidance. A lot of times we make assumptions. You don't want to deal with certain things for whatever reason, how we look, our status, whatever the case may be. But that clean pain is whenever we embrace the unknown, we embrace the uncertainty, and we confront and address what needs to be addressed. So even if individuals say, well, I don't have an anxiety disorder, I don't have a traumatic stress disorder, I would start from, go from that which you might need to work on, or what Minister Sar says, growing edges. Whatever, start with your growing edges and confront that and address that. And I think that could be able to move us forward. So that's just something that I offer. Thank you, Brother Kevin. Wonderful discussion for session one.
Brother Paul, the closing remarks, questions, comments, concerns, challenges.
Yeah, I would just like to close by saying, and again, I would agree that the session has been very therapeutic for me. And I think that the greatest power that we have in communication, internal and external, is so therapeutic that it's healing. And my journey here is spiritual. And so the physical things that we talk about, I have in a context in my mind, but they're not really relevant to me. And what I mean by that is because I've chosen to be grounded in the spirit. So the things that most people are being filled with in the carnality of the thought process doesn't exist in my universe, because I created a universe that's grounded in the energy source of spirit. And so therefore I can take each word, each line, and therapeutically transfer the experience that one shares into a spiritual understanding, which is based on the spirit world, which is very real, much more real than we realize, I think. And it continues to help me. Dr. Winkler said, I live in a heavenly state, a peaceful state at all times, is because I just simply transcended the physical experience back to its source. And when we do that, we are never trapped into the carnalities, because it doesn't exist unless you create it. That's it.
Mr. Murray, any closing remarks, questions, comments, concerns, challenges?
You know, I always got something to say, Kevin.
Mhm.
You know, something stuck out that we said earlier that was really very powerful. When they talk about thought and education. See, the thought process is useless if there's no learning and education behind it. I'm not talking about going to school and getting a diploma education. I'm talking about life's everyday education and knowledge that we can ourselves do without, you know, where we ain't got to really just get into a classroom and a book and study it. But thought is totally useless if the education and the knowledge and learning is not behind it. I'm a mindologist, and I really do work hard on the thought process and the mental mind of people to build knowledge, education, and a step forward. And I'm telling y'all, not because it's me, but go on my Facebook, on my YouTube page, and pull up Mr. W. Murray and watch the show I did on Am I Still a Slave? And answer the questions to yourself to find out, are you still a slave? Because you don't realize it, and you are. But the biggest question, here's the biggest question now, Kevin, the topic of stress disorder, just stress disorder. Y'all, we know that it's there. We know how to help people that's going through this. And we've got to do more than we're doing, because somebody's got to lead. Kevin, this group that you got together, brother, I applaud you, brother. I give you a standing ovation behind the brothers that's on this panel and discussion, and the sisters that's on the panel and we're discussing. But I got a question that's even greater than that. With everything that we know and with the situations going on, what are you doing about it? Ask yourself that. What am I doing about it? And I'm gonna give a comment, Kevin. I'm gonna give a compliment, Kevin, to you, because you made me laugh and smile last week. I mean, last show we had, because and it never dawned on me. So my brother, thank you. I had never ever considered myself an elder. It surprised me. It surprised me when you said that. But do you know, man, how good that sounded to me? And I didn't take it as you degrade. It just never dawned on me at the age of 70 that I'm an elder. But I really am. And so, my brother, thank you. I appreciate the fact that you gave me that compliment. But and everyone else, and my other brother Winkler said that a couple of times today. So, my brother, thank you, because you opened up my mind on something. You really made me open my mind on something when I was referred to as an elder.
Yes, sir.
Brother,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Brother Michael Collins, any closing remarks, questions, concerns, challenges?
I want to say, first of all, thank you for inviting me to the group. I just found about it this morning, and it's been a pleasure to share and hear everybody's different ideas. Everybody's ideas are valid as we all work to make this earth this planet a better place to live. As we walk with love and harmony, we learn how to communicate. We learn how to tap into our spirit. We learn to tap into our higher levels of consciousness. And I'll just leave you with a story. There was a statue, a golden statue of Buddha, and it was on an island in the South Pacific, and the Japanese were getting ready to invade that island. So the people said, what can we do? So all of a sudden they covered the statue with leaves and everything, and you couldn't tell it was golden, and they lost the feeling of that golden statue. And after the war was over, this statue was covered for years and years. And then through rain and weather, the patches, the dross that they had put on the statue to hide the goldenness started to fall off. And this is just like with us. When we give ourselves the permission to allow the dross to fall off of ourselves, to come into that golden being, as the singer says, living your life like it's golden. When we start to do that and live from the utmost inner peace, then people around you will vibrate in that peace. People will vibrate into that feeling of goodness. People will be willing to open up. We'll all be able to help people because everybody at their core has that universal being in themselves. And so when we learn how to communicate and to tap into that core, what we do is we learn how to tap into the holiness within everyone. And when we tap into that holiness, we can communicate with people instantly. So I thank everybody for being on the call. I thank everybody for being honest and sharing diverse opinions, because from that diversity comes that unity. And when we start to unify, then we start to walk in harmony. So I just want to say thank you, and I was glad to be a part of this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Brother Asar, you have any closing remarks, questions, comments, concerns, or challenges?
Thank you, Brother Kevin, for having me. Also, fellow panelists, thank you for sharing space with me. I want to say to Mr. Mary, I appreciate the material as well as the spiritual. You know, I look at everything as being balanced. So I hope when I get your age, I'm as good as you.
It's a rough job, but somebody got to do it.
You're representing pretty well in that material, in the material realm, and that spirit is shining straight to it. So from an African or spiritual perspective, we say that the spirit it can manifest in the material. Without the material, the spirit cannot manifest. Without the spirit, you know, the material has no hope. So we need them both. So furthermore, I want to say, as being a clinician, I want to be clear, because sometimes I think in the Black community, African American community, people of color, whatever we want to call it, many times mental health is looked down upon, is frowned upon, is looked at as even a threat. And I'm going to say that's part of our anxiety from our trauma. So I agree with many of us who say we can transcend those traumas and really be able to really evaluate, you know, what is threat, what's not threat, the real from the unreal, you know. I also want to say, you know, I just want to read this. And it says, an important aspect of emotions is their effect on the selectivity of attention. Anxious persons likely select certain things in their environment and overlook others in the effort to prove that they are justified in considering the situation frightening. I hear this in our community a lot, especially as it pertains to the people that we label as white. And I'm not saying it's not a threat, but what I'm saying is things seemingly are heightened. And whenever something is too heightened, we cannot operate at our highest level to create. And spiritual is creation. If they falsely justify their fear, they augment their anxieties by the selective response and set up a vicious circle of anxiety, distorted perception, and increased anxiety. You hear that? The circle. If alternatively, they falsely reassure themselves by selective thinking, appropriate anxiety may be reduced and they may fail to take necessary precautions. So with that, I'll say in closing, it's never a this or that conversation. It's not this is better than that. It's a this, that, and conversation.
Thank you. I say this, I want to thank you all for being a part of this gathering, getting the draws off from the goal. That means that dealing with our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, our attitude, our language, and our action. Truth is the cause that impacts the results of one's reality. The truth, the purest form of integration, is when the sperm mixed with the ovum. So we are here. And I also realized this, that there are 4 things that we face every day: problems, questions, issues, and needs. Problems are designed to be solved, issues resolved, needs met, and questions answered. So what is the problem? Some would say there is an identity crisis. But you know, crisis can mean something that can strengthen you or weaken you. So what needs to be strengthened is not only our resolve, but a sense of accountability, character resolve. What is the need? The need is for spiritual guidance. Anything that remains in its natural form and natural state is spiritual. What is the answer to the question? It is a question of governance. How we govern our affairs on a daily basis, and that which we govern in our mind. Problems, questions, issues, and needs. The answer is in you, because circumstances makes us other than ourselves. You can tell the psychology of one's mentality by what he or she produces. And know this, in closing, people are only responding due to the extent of the damage and the injury that has been done to his or her humanity. Yes, next time we're going to talk about bipolar and depression. That will be on the 16th at 8:30, same time next week. I want to thank you again, and I really mean it from my heart. And it's one more thing: love is the manner and the way in which we communicate as a family, our humanity. Until next time, talk to you. Getting the draw
Blessings.
off the go. Yes.
Blessings,
you.
everyone. Blessings.
And peace be with everyone.
Yes.
Peace.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone.
Good show, Kevin. Good group.
Yeah.
Fantastic, my brother. Fantastic.
Hey, Michael, you still there?
Yes.
Yes. Did you send me your email address? How did you do you have an email that you can give me?
Yes. It's Ananda, ANANDA MICH ael@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I talk to you.
It's been a pleasure.
Phyllis Mitchell.